So season 3 of Ted Lasso has been announced to be coming out on March the 15th this year. And I thought, as the world's biggest Ted Lasso fan, I decided, why don't I take you through every single Ted Lasso character? I'm gonna put them on the board and I'm gonna take you through what's gonna happen. That was the worst intro I've ever done in my life. Now, I've spoken about season 1 in a previous video quite a bit before, and today I'm mostly probably gonna focus on season 2 because there's a lot of things that I've already said about season 1. I don't wanna be repeating myself. I've only got this many minutes on this earth, and I don't wanna spend that many of them talking about season 1 over and over again. But season 1 is great, and if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. And season 2, I don't think is as popular as season 1. I haven't actually fact-checked that. I don't imagine it's as popular as season 1. But for me personally, season 2 is when this show went from a show I liked to, wow, this is the greatest thing ever made. I don't want to watch anything else ever again. And I'd say the general vibe of season 2 is you take this fun, quirky show with quick-witted humor and throw all the characters into therapy and you realize they all have daddy issues. And when I say they all have daddy issues, like, they all have daddy issues. There are so many dads in this season and so many just bad relationships with dads in this season. Also, 1 or 2 good ones, but mostly just bad dad relationships. Like, it went from this show that relied on this quick-witted humor to just using like silent, gut-wrenching, wordless moments. And it's just so pure and powerful and emotional. I love it. I love everything about it. I'd say probably the main difference between season 1 and 2 is that there's probably more skippable episodes in season 2. I don't like the use of the word filler episode really, because I think that would imply that nothing important happens, that there's no emotional development of any characters in it. And every episode has some character getting some sort of emotional development. But there are a couple episodes that you could probably skip and not miss any of the main plot. Like, there's a Christmas special in this season, which I feel like makes sense because it was Ted's first Christmas in London, and it also delves into things that haven't been delved into yet, like, oh, what do all these players who are here from foreign countries and don't have their families here do over Christmas? Oh, well, they all go to Higgins' house, apparently, and it was actually a really sweet moment. And there are a couple parallels to moments from season 1 in there. All in all, the Christmas special's good, but there aren't any like huge plot points delved into. It's more like a slice of life of Ted Lasso episode. And then you also have the Beard After Hours episode, which I don't really know what that is. It's not an episode of Ted Lasso, I'll tell you that. Like, I don't know if it's even real or if it was all just a dream, but I guess it gives you a proper insight into Coach Beard's mind and insecurities, and it goes on for quite a while. It's a long episode. You could definitely skip it, and I don't think you miss that much. Like, this is a niche reference, but it's basically Stranger Things Season 2, Episode 7. Remember that weird episode where Eleven leaves Hawkins and decides to go off and become an X-Men character? It's that, but with Coach Beard. There are some nice moments in there, but all in all, there aren't episodes like that in Season 1. And also features Gary Lineker and Thierry Henry in there for some reason. And you know what? The guest stars in this season are fantastic. They're all just like perfectly fit into the show. I love all of it. I mean, as soon as Chris Kamara and Jeff Stelling on Gillette Soccer Saturday appeared in this show, I was convinced it was the greatest show of all time. I didn't need any more selling on it. Roy Kent swearing on live TV. What more do you need? Anyway, with that all said, let's get into the actual characters in the show, starting with Ted. And Vegard's gonna pin the stuff for me because
this is why I'm here, okay? That would be the rest of this video.
So first we have Ted, and I feel like I kind of said everything I want to say about Ted in my first video on this. I can't remember exactly what I said, but essentially, I see myself in this character, or at least I like to think he's like me. Maybe he's not. He's how I would like to be, I guess. And especially when we get to season 2, we really start to see the effect Ted is having on the club and the people at the club and just everyone around him. Like, they make an effort to show that he knows pretty much all of the backroom stuff, which I would say is the difference between a good manager and a great manager. Ted's a great manager. And one of my favorite moments in the entire season is in the Christmas special, where pretty much all of the players from the team that aren't based in England go to Higgins' house for Christmas dinner and bring their own food, and it's like, it just shows the effect he has had.
You've become quite popular, Leslie. This is by far the most people we've ever had.
Everyone's a team now. They all do things together. I mean, even Jamie and Roy have a mature conversation where Roy forgives Jamie this season. And for that reason, I'm going to create a connection between him and AFC Richmond, just because that gives something to do on the board. But to revert back to the first season temporarily, one of the things I didn't talk about because it was kind of a spoiler when I last spoke about this was Ted's relationship with his ex-wife, Michelle. So Ted and Michelle are one of the two relationships that ended just before the show started and essentially set the show into motion. They also have a son called Henry, who now lives with Michelle back in Kansas, and Ted is obviously trying to give Michelle space by moving all the way to London, and you can tell he misses his family, especially in season 2. He's shown to feel like he always feels held back by the distance and time zones to actually be there for his son. Like, he gets a call about an emergency at school and he's like,
No, I work in London. Yeah, no, it's a heck of a commute. Tell you what, how about I call my wife or his mom?
But more than anything, I just love how this whole breakup was depicted in the show. I feel like in 90% of sitcoms, breakups are like over-dramatized and completely unrealistic to real life. Whereas in this, it's just two people who have fallen out of love, grown apart, and the show depicts exactly that. Like, I don't even dislike Michelle. Obviously, she is the person who broke the heart of this kind, loving person being Ted, but she's never painted out as the villain in the show. Ted has nothing against her, and honestly, even I want to root for Michelle. I mean, it's kind of implied by the end of season 2 that she might have a new partner coming in, but I assume that will probably come into play in season 3, where they probably bring Michelle back. Michelle and Henry aren't actually really in season 2 beyond like through a couple FaceTime calls, but Henry is definitely in season 3 as he is shown in the trailer. Weirdly, in a West Ham shirt, which is like the rival team, but we'll get into that in a second. So that whole dynamic with Ted being divorced from Michelle and Michelle looking after Henry and Henry coming back to London for a bit, it's definitely something to keep an eye on in season 3. And with that, let's talk about the other relationship which ended, setting the show into motion, Rebecca and Rupert. So obviously, essentially the premise of the entire show is that Rupert owned AFC Richmond Football Club, but when he got a divorce from Rebecca, she took ownership of Richmond following the divorce.
How exactly did that happen?
Yeah, I don't know but that is the premise of the show. So I didn't really speak about Rebecca much in my spoiler-free episode because everything about her character is a spoiler, essentially. But she's basically the main character in season 1. Ignore the name of the show. This show in season 1 is just Rebecca Walton. If you look at the very first shot of season 1 and the very last shot of season 1, they are both her. And the whole point of season 1 is showing how she got from point A to point B. Obviously, you're not meant to like Rebecca at the start of the show. She purely acts out of her own self-interest and doesn't care who gets in her way, especially an American with a mustache that wants to just do good for other people. She does not want him to succeed. But in a Sheriff Woody in Toy Story 1 style plot twist, she managed to overcome the odds and become everyone's favorite character by the end of the first season. And the real enemy always was Rupert. Everything he does has an ulterior motive, and specifically the most recent thing he's done to try and get at Rebecca for some reason, as if he hasn't already done enough, is by West Ham Football Club. So for anyone unfamiliar with the real world Premier League, West Ham are a real side based in East London, and therefore Richmond would be a London rival to this side. And essentially, they're going to be the main enemy team in season 3, especially with the acquisition of their new manager, formerly Nate the Great.
You could not know that this show was in Britain, but if you see this haircut, it's all you need to know.
Yeah, I was just talking about Rebecca and how the first season's basically all about her, and the opening shot and the last shot are both of her. Nate is the main character in season 2, with the same opening shot and same closing shot being of him. And therefore the whole season is about the fall of Nate the Great. Kind of. I mean, it's mostly just the subplot between him and Beard. Ted doesn't really realize what's going on, but also that's kind of the entire point, that Ted is neglecting Nate, and there's like a chilling moment in the penultimate episode of the season when Ted realizes he's been neglecting Nate, and that's good, that's good. I mean, if you really analyze what happens in this season, you'll notice that Ted and Nate barely have a one-to-one conversation, like, at all. And Nate, who thinks that he is the key to all of Richmond's success, starts to believe that he isn't being appreciated for what he's done and wants to become the boss. And obviously, when Rupert offers him the opportunity to be West Ham's manager, he becomes West Ham's manager, making him the main villain in the upcoming season. And I'm not gonna make too many friends by saying this, but I don't hate Nate. I don't. I'm sorry. I can hear you. I'm sorry. I think he's a very well-written character, and once again, a very easy character to relate to. He constantly feels overlooked and lacks confidence in certain social situations, especially when it comes to confrontation. And genuinely, all he wants is to be liked above all. But that also ends up being his downfall. And as soon as he, the overlooked misfit, gets put into a position of power, he is shown to be rude and wants to abuse that position. And I'm not even just talking about season 2 when he gets promoted to being coach here. His first ever interaction with Ted.
Stop touching the grass, please!
Yep.
Who are you?
I'm Ted Lasso. This is Coach Beard here.
Oh, God, you're the new manager.
Once he sees Ted as someone he can get something out of, wow. Completely different person. But then, of course, more specifically in season 2, when Ted promotes him to being a coach, he is immediately taking advantage of his position, specifically through basically bullying Colin and Will. And as I've already covered, this all culminates with him wanting to become the boss, having a big fight with Ted, ripping up the Believe sign, and then siding with Rupert at West Ham. But this is a show about forgiveness, so it would be completely naive to assume that Nate isn't going to get some sort of redemption arc in season 3. I think that's like the one thing that's probably inevitable about this season, and I think it's one of the things I'm most excited for. I can't wait to see how Ted tries to win over someone who he's lost before. I'm also really interested to see what the relationship between Rupert and Nate will be like in season 3, and whether it will kind of like mirror Rebecca and Ted in season 1, with like Rupert just being completely abusive to Nate until Nate realizes. Obviously then the rivalry between Richmond and West Ham is going to be one of the main focuses of season 3, and they're going to have 2 games against each other, which are going to make up 2 very important episodes, I assume. Maybe even 3 or 4. There might be an episode before, an episode after, an aftermath to it. There's going to be a lot of focus around that rivalry, and it's just going to be really great. I can't wait. And I'm so curious now to see how many scenes Nate and Ted end up sharing and how many conversations they have over season 3. I'm assuming it's going to be more than season 2, but it's also because one of the core structures of Ted Lasso is that every season there's a character that's introduced that Ted desperately tries to win over with his just relentless positivity. With there also being the fact of the character that needs to be won over doesn't want to be won over. Obviously, in season 1, you had Rebecca. He brings her biscuits every day. He's constantly trying to be her friend rather than like her employee, and just creates this beautiful relationship with her. And then in season 2, we have Dr. Sharon, the club psychologist. And I think her addition in season 2 is one of the best parts of the entire season. I think it provides the perfect gateway to delve into the deeper themes explored in this season by introducing a therapist, as Ted has to overcome this kind of stigma he has towards therapy because of a previous bad experience, and finally opens up to someone about the trauma of his dad's death and the effect it had on him as a child. Also, with the twist and cherry on the cake that this time the person Ted's trying to win over is literally a therapist and sees right through everything he's trying to do from a literal scientific standpoint. But he still wins her over. And honestly, I would say Sharon learned as much from him as he learned from her. But then at the end of the season, Sharon leaves Richmond, meaning we don't know what her situation is going to be in season 3. I'm assuming she's going to come back, but I don't imagine she's going to have quite as significant a role. And yeah, since Ted's already won her over, who's the person Ted's going to have to win over this season? Well, my prediction is Nate, someone he's won over already, but now lost and going to have to try and win them over again. Anyway, sorry, I completely detailed off here. I was talking about Rebecca and I somehow tangented off with all of this, and I want to get back to talking about Rebecca, and specifically, I think you could have had questions about what her role in season 2 was going to be now she was no longer the foil to Ted. And seemingly in season 2, her main focus was about working out who she wanted to be and finding love, which put together with Ted's emotional growth and the show essentially being a rom-com means the main fan theory and belief is that Ted Becker, the ship of Ted and Rebecca, is going to become canon in season 3. Now, I don't really have a horse in this race. I don't particularly care if Ted or Rebecca end up together. I just want it to be done well, and I want Richmond to win the Premier League at the end of season 3. I don't think they will, though. But there is actually quite a bit to this ship. Firstly, the universe seems to line up with the dates of their tragic backstory and the day they lost their dad, at least in a relationship perspective in Rebecca's case, completely aligned. They also definitely have chemistry. They've always got on, whether it be as a boss and an employee or as friends. They get on well, and they're also just kind of the polar opposite to their previous partner. I mean, we don't know much about Michelle, but I don't think she's particularly like Rebecca. And then finally, in Ted's rom-communism speech in episode 5, everything he said feels like it can be related back to just the events of the show. Let me quickly explain. So Ted says he believes in rom-communism.
Believing in rom-communism is all about believing that everything's going to work out in the end.
But in this specific moment in time, Richmond FC, the team, are in the Dark Forest. And this could also then be used to relate to the show that Ted is currently in the Dark Forest because he hasn't opened up about his dad, hasn't dealt with all that trauma. And Rebecca is also in a kind of weird limbo place and hasn't found what she wants yet. But then Ted points out,
Fairy tales do not start, nor do they end, in the Dark Forest. That son of a gun always shows up smack dab in the middle of a story.
and if the show is to finish with season 3, season 2, episode 5 would be smack dab in the middle of the show itself.
Now, it may not work out how you think it will, or how you hope it does, but believe me, it will all work out.
And therefore, the happy ending and Ted's belief that everything works out in the end would lead to Rebecca and Ted getting together at the end of season 3. And then there's also just the fact that they're the main two characters, and if this show is a rom-com, the main two characters in a rom-com usually end up together in like 99% of rom-coms I've ever seen, so yeah, it makes sense. However, there are some spanners in the works at the minute. In season 1, Ted sparked a romance with Rebecca's best friend from childhood, Sassy.
No way someone's called Sassy.
Her real name's Flo. And while it doesn't seem to be anything serious, they were also seen together towards the end of season 2, so there's something going on there. And then, as a further problem, Rebecca started dating Sam. Now, this relationship is given a lot more screen time than the Sassy and Ted relationship, and is definitely more serious. However, I do think it is just a subversion. I don't think it's gonna last. Ted was literally used as a red herring before they revealed it was Sam that Rebecca was talking to, and they're still not like officially together at the end of season 2. So ultimately, I believe this relationship will run its course in season 3, and eventually Ted and Rebecca will get together, making Ted Becca canon. Imagine cutting, oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
She looks rough right now.
I don't know how well the camera can see that, but she has been through it. You've pinned her face. Also, on the topic of Sam, who is just the best character, by the way. I mean, they're all the best character, but I actually met Tahib and told him he was the best character, so I have to keep up appearances. One of my favorite things about season 2 is how they start delving into football activism. Obviously starting with Sam's movement and protest against the oil corporation polluting in Nigeria, and then continuing on later in the season to talk about mental health in sports and all the stigma around that. And I'm not entirely sure what the direction in the next season will be, but I have no doubt that there's going to be more activism in sports storylines in this. And you know, another fan headcanon is that Colin might be gay, creating like an LGBT player in the Premier League sort of storyline. But the only reason people think this is because he mentions the dating app Grindr once.
Banter. B-A-N-T-R.
Oh, like Grinder.
Yeah.
I also think there's a chance that Edwin Akufu, the Ghanaian billionaire, could also return next season and be like an antagonist to Sam. I mean, he kind of came up in the final 2 episodes of the season and seemed important, but then I don't know, Sam turned him down and he really lost it with him. And I don't know what the point of that was other than to like get Sam to buy a Nigerian restaurant, which was also apparently really important because it was one of the things they showed at the end of the season as like an important thing. It's also a World Cup year. Edwin Akufu talks about the World Cup. I don't know if the World Cup's going to come into play at all. I mean, he does say after Sam turns him down, he's going to ensure he never gets called up to the Nigerian national team, which could be like a cool antagonist to like Sam, because obviously Sam's probably getting good enough to be able to play for the Nigerian national team. And if he get held back from that because of Edwin Akufu and he's got to like make amends with that. And also just watching players get called up to their national team in general could be a very interesting storyline for this show. And I know I'm getting off topic, but that's the kind of stuff that could potentially happen in season 3, but I don't know. So I'm going to talk about another one of my absolute favorite characters, Keeley. And it feels weird that this even happened. This is like a Anne and Andy being together in the first season of Parks and Rec weird. But at the start of the show, Keeley is with Jamie. They are a couple. I'm sorry if you just blanked that out your memory, but they are together at the start of the show. Obviously, this was a dumpster fire of a relationship, and Keeley realized she deserves way better than Jamie, and that's what brings in Roy Kent, Jamie's teammate / rival. And you could say this is a bit of a love triangle, but it's not. that's actually a complete disservice to probably the best relationship in the entire show. Roy and Keeley start dating towards the end of season 1, and they are just one of the best parts of the entire show. Like, as a couple, they just bring the absolute best out of each other, pushing each other to achieve things. I mean, if you look at where they were at the start of the show compared to where they are now, it's insane. Roy is a player who's reaching the twilight of his career. He's realizing his legs aren't the same and he's gonna have to retire. And I'm pretty sure everyone will agree, Roy is one of the best, if not the best character in the show. I know I've said like way too many characters are the best character in the show, but that's because they're all the best character. How are you meant to pick in this show? And then you had Keeley, who also felt like her best years were behind her and equally doesn't know what she wants to do for the rest of her life. But now, going into season 3, Roy is back at Richmond as a coach and genuinely seems to be a really good coach. I mean, he was good with the under-9 girls side that his niece was in. And I mean, Richmond's turnaround in form after Roy joined the team isn't really shown that much in the show. But if you look at the little board in the background of the coach's room, it actually updates their record as the season goes on, and you can actually see their upturn in form from before and after Roy joined. Roy's a great coach, and Keeley is a CEO at her own PR firm now. Incredible. Like, I genuinely think this is one of the best relationships I've ever seen depicted in a TV show. And I can't not mention, when they're looking after Roy's niece Phoebe, the whole dynamic genuinely makes up some of, if not the best moments in the entire show. Like, I know, Roy looking after a 9-year-old girl is just pure comedy. And Roy, just in any situation he doesn't really feel in place in, is pure comedy. Roy's the best. And I also just want to say, Phoebe's actor, I think, does a phenomenal job. Like, a genuinely really talented child actor. And I also just want to say as well, with Nora, I think Nora's actor does a phenomenal job as well. So, yeah, the child actors in this show are, like, surprisingly very good. Maybe my brain has just turned into mush because I watch too much Disney Channel stuff where they basically use the first take every time. But I've been very impressed by the child actors in this show. And like, genuinely, if I'm gonna kind of criticize this show, one of my least favorite things about season 2 was the fact that they kind of seemed to tease a potential breakup between Roy and Keeley. The show does not need that. Like, I don't mind when they have a fight. Fighting is healthy in relationships, and Roy and Keeley are both in a very healthy relationship where they can actually express their issues and talk about their problems in a healthy manner. But throwing Jamie back into the mix and making him confess his love to Keeley in season 2, and then Roy leaving Keeley for like 6 weeks to go on holiday, we don't need them to break up. That doesn't need to happen this next season, okay? Just let them get married. And I'm also hoping that Jamie gets a love interest in the next season because, I mean, there was the whole drama of him getting Richmond relegated at the end of season 1 and then coming back to Richmond and the team being annoyed about him coming back and then him making amends with the rest of the team, but now, what does he have to do? It feels like he's completed his character arc, and I even felt that was kind of telling at the end of season 2. Like, you didn't really feel like he had that much to do. So I really hope they give Jamie a relationship of some kind in season 3, like someone who's actually good for him, so he can actually have something to do. Next up, I want to talk about Coach Beard, who is just, like, intentionally the most elusive character in the entire show. I mean, there is an entire 45-minute episode dedicated to what I'm assuming are like his innermost thoughts and fears, and I feel like I know less about him after that than I did before. We don't even know his name. But what we do know is that he's in this on-again, off-again relationship with this girl called Jane, who's in like a couple episodes. And while they are admittedly awful together, I feel like Coach Beard is weird and thrives off being in a bad relationship. I don't really get it, to be honest. I don't really know what else to say. They're the worst relationship in the show, but maybe that also makes them the best relationship in the show because that's what they want to be. They're not. Oh. Guys, I don't know what happened, but Vegard just stormed off and kicked the camera. Like, he was just furious. I don't know why. Anyway, following on from that, let's talk about Higgins, who is just, what can I even say? They've got a lovely little family going on there. I haven't much to say about Higgins and his family, other than the fact Rainbow is the best episode of television I have ever seen. That isn't even me exaggerating. It is my favorite episode of this show, and it's my favorite episode of any show. Obviously, the title Rainbow is referring to the song that was playing the night Higgins met his wife, and then Ted and Roy have this whole rom-com storyline going on in the background where Ted's trying to convince Roy to come back to coaching, and Isaac finds his love for football again. And also, actually, with that said, we've got a thing of Isaac here. Vegard stormed off, so I'm gonna have to pin it myself now. I don't really have that much else to say about Isaac other than the fact he's the captain. He's great. It's good to see his role growing in the show from pretty much just almost an extra in season 1 to having a full, like, proper role in season 2. I don't know what's going to happen to him in season 3 because I have watched the trailer and I've analyzed the trailer and I noticed that Sam has the captain's armband on before one of the games. And I don't know what that means for Isaac's future at Richmond. Maybe he's just injured and maybe that's his storyline. He gets injured and he has to deal with the rehabilitation of his injury. Maybe he's off on international duty because of that whole international duty storyline I was talking about earlier. But I'm kind of nervous he's going to leave the club. Maybe he gets like a big money transfer because he's performing well. And then they have to deal with that. All I know is that I'm ready to get hurt again. And then finally, the last character to pin. Football is life! It's Danny Rojas. I don't really have anything to say about Danny either. I felt like his role in season 2 was very limited, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. Like, he's only introduced in the middle of season 1 and then's a pretty important character. And in season 2, in the first episode, it looks like he's going to be super important. And then, I don't know, this is going to sound like a wild sentence to anyone who hasn't seen this show, but he kills a dog and then does nothing else for the entire season, basically. So basically what I'm saying is give me a good storyline for Danny in season 3. And with that said, let's get into my final thoughts and extra stuff that I couldn't fit into the video but wanted to mention. Firstly, let's address the rumors that this is going to be the final season of the show. And while obviously I have a respect for the creative integrity of the people making the show and them wanting it to be the best thing it can possibly be, and if they think it's for the best of the show for it to end with this being its final season, I guess I can live with that. But with that said, I think I could write about 7 seasons for this show right off the bat. Like, genuinely, just from a footballing perspective, okay? Start with this season. Say they don't win the Premier League, okay? They finish 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, I don't know. The next season, oh my God, they've qualified to play in Europe. We could have a whole season of a European tour. They go off to Madrid. They go off to Munich. They go off to Athens, I don't know. European tour season, easy. 1 season sorted. Next season, proper title challenge. Maybe they actually go on and win the league. Oh, amazing. And oh no, it's season 6. The US men's national team want to hire Ted Lasso because the amazing job he's done. How can he possibly say no to the chance of being back in America with Henry as charge of the US men's national team? Oh my God, there's so much potential. I've given you 3 stories and you can take that. You don't need to credit me, don't worry. Also, the potential for marketing with this show should be enough reason for Apple to be basically forcing them to continue making them. Not only have you got a Nike-sponsored shirt that you could sell millions of, I'm talking millions of sales of this shirt if you wanted to sell it on the scale of football shirts. But also, there is a football pitch as a main set where the common practice for a football pitch is to have advertising boards around the pitch. You could literally have product placement for all sorts of real-world brands that you are getting paid for in every episode around the pitch. Do you realize how easy this show can be to make money from? I assume they do, and I assume they are planning on doing that. But I raise it because up until the end of season 2, all of the brands shown in the show are completely fictional. And I also just want to bring up that one of these fictional brands is called O'Gorman's Irish Whiskey. And I have a feeling that was a reference to me, even though I had never spoken about this show before when they were filming season 2. And I just want to say thank you for noticing me. And I am taking this and running. And yeah, either way, if you want to end it this season, you can. I don't think you should. And finally, I don't know how I haven't mentioned this yet, there is an entire episode in season 2 dedicated to rickrolling you. They don't do it once. They don't do it twice. They do it 3 times. They turn an entire funeral speech into a rickroll. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's probably it. Nope, they rickroll you again. It's a great episode as well. I just wanted to bring that up. And yeah, if you can't tell, I'm pretty excited for Ted Lasso season 3. And if you aren't, what are you doing with your life? But really just sit there and have a think, you know? Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like. You can subscribe, check out my other Ted Lasso video or just any other video. You don't have to particularly click on this one. You can go look at one down below. Check out my Patreon, Twitch in the description down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.